So, in the aftermath of the Labour victory, aka Starmageddon, there were a lot of people who came out crying and screaming about Labour cronyism. Oh, look at all these people that they are appointing to the civil service. So and so made a donation, and they're now in this, job in the government. Isn't this just cronyism? And bear in mind, this was largely whipped up by, of course, first of all, the right wing press, who were very, very eager to point out any problem they could with this new government coming in. Because well, they don't like them, and they have sort of continued on in that vein. Not only did you see figures on the right sort of use this as an opportunity to sort of go and bash Labour, you saw this also by people on the left who also did not like the incoming Labour government purely because, well, they just don't like this incoming Labour government. We've been over this before. Figures who basically say, "Oh no, you don't understand. This is just the red Tory party." Despite the fact you have seen this party pass the largest increase in workers' rights bills. You've seen them change stuff with council funding, with council going to be getting more funding rather than taking away from them. We're nationalising the rails by this end of Parliament. There's a ton of stuff that this government has done, and that's just stuff I can think of at the top of my head. They are fundamentally different. And of course, they used this to just sort of, beat the incoming Labour government to say, "Hi, see, you might have changed government, but nothing's changed. Nothing's changed." Well, of course, what happened in this, because it caused such a stink, because it caused such an outcry, there was now a review put into place. And this review came out just yesterday. And I have to generally ask, how many people on the left and right who a couple of months ago were crying about this, that this was like the single biggest issue ever, how many people are actually going to follow up, having spoken out about this, having been so outraged about this? How many people are now going to follow up with this review? I generally have to ask, both on the right and left. The right wing press, I can see why they aren't going to touch this with a barge pole. They've basically just going to ignore it. I can see why. But again, there are a lot of people who, on the left, who use this as a to beat the Labour Party with, as much as anything as they possibly could. Are they going to follow up on this review? I don't think so. I genuinely don't think so, because there are just a lot of people who just don't like Labour, regardless. Literally, Keir Starmer could announce that he has cured cancer, and there will be some figures who will be coming out and saying, "Oh, how dare Keir Starmer cure cancer?" Like, generally, that is how it comes across sometimes from some of those people on the left when they are doing this. So, what has this review said? What does this mean going forward? And what are the implications of this? Because I'll tell you now, what the watchdog has said, if you want the TDLR, the watchdog has come out and said that they are now largely satisfied over this review, that they are largely satisfied. They've had some problems, they've made some recommendations, but overall, no evidence of cronyism was found. So that's the TDLR. But let's go into more into this and cover this more, because I think it does deserve to cover it after it being made such a big issue just a couple of months ago. So let's go more into this. But before we do go into this, please do remember to click on the like, the share button, and of course the subscribe button if you are new. And of course, remember to click the Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link, and of course, Buy Me Coffee if you want to buy me coffee. There's the YouTube thank you button, and of course, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on then into this. So, Watchdog largely now satisfied after cronyism row review. So, a review into now the appointments to the government jobs has now concluded, and it is now largely satisfied with the processes now in place. So the Civil Service Commission, pardon me, launched a probe back in August after the Conservatives said the appointments to this new Labour government were evidence now of a culture of cronyism. Again, remember all those calls that happened about that. This review examined the exemption appointments, whereby the normal civil service recruitment rules are bypassed. And this is where it starts to get interesting. It found that fewer exceptions were made in the months after the general election than is typical in a similar length of time. So not only did Labour use this exemption rule less, but they found that they did it right. This will be here in a moment. It also said that some departments did appear now to lack a central tracking of these systems for appointments and identified at least 2 technical breaches for the recruitment principles relating now to just record keeping issues. So again, nothing, should we say, finding this culture of cronyism when they were looking at it. Oh, yeah, there's some technical stuff going on there, but it's nothing, no cronyism going on here, which is, of course, not the sexy news story that the right wing press would want to cover. And of course, this isn't suddenly become the cudgel that certain people on the left can now bash the Labour Party with. So, following, of course, the election in July, the Labour government made a number of appointments, which, of course, raised eyebrows. So Ian Caulfield, a former banker who, of course, donated £20,000 to Labour in the temporary, got in now for a temporary Treasury role, helped to deliver an investment summit back in October. Jess Sargent, who had also worked for a think tank Labour Together, became the deputy director for the Cabinet Office Priority and Consultation Group. And between November 2023 and September of 2024, Labour Together made a donation in kind to the Cabinet Office Minister, Nick Thomas Salmons. Emily Middleton was also named the Director General of the Department for Science, Innovation, Technology, where the Secretary of State of his course, Peter Kyle. She was obviously previously partly consultant to a firm, Public Digital, which paid for her secondment to Kyle's office, now in opposition. A donation in kind of more than over £6,500 was also seconded now to Labour Together. In August, the shadow Conservative minister, John Greal, called now for a full transparency, saying that Keir Starmer can no longer try to brush this under the carpet. In that very same month, the Civil Service Commission, which regulates the civil service appointment, said, of course, it would be launching a review, given the interest in a number of recent civil service appointments, now by exception. The commission was led by Liza Stewart, once a Labour MP, who had since been now appointed as an independent peer to the House of Lords. So, that's what happened. That was the whole throwaway. Sounds a lot less bigger than it's made out to be in August, but that was happening. So what were these exceptions? What are they? And what, of course, did the report finally find? So, according to the civil service exception, the appointments can obviously be made in certain circumstances. For example, if it is, of course, a temporary appointment, if the job requires a highly specialized skills, or to fill in the gaps of period of short-term and urgent need. So again, I think that is fine. I think you can and should have a recruitment process like that. Say you need someone with highly specialized skills, and you sort of say, I want you to hire you, bish bash bosh, we'll get you in as quickly as we can because we need someone with a highly specialized skill to fill this gap or this role like immediately. We can't wait for a recruitment process to take over. I think having an exemption like that makes a whole lot of sense for a government. But the commission, of course, first must approve the exemption appointments, even at the most senior grade. But of course, this is now below this level of departments to have a free hand, of course, to recruit. The commission report found that in 2023 to 2024, 6,977 exception appointments were made out of a total of 98,000 appointments. So that's how many appointments were made during that time in that point. But this, of course, represents a 25% fall on the previous year, where 9,000 appointments were, of course, made by exception. And between July and August in 2024, departments just approved 550 appointments by exception. The report said that this was now a considerably lower than they might have even been expecting based on data from previous years. So the appointments by exception lowered when Labour came into office, and they were like, "Yeah, this is actually lower than even we'd been expecting when you look at previous years' appointments by the data." So, Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden, said that the report was worth reading. However, Henry Newman, the former advisor to the Conservative ministers, who now writes about Whitehall, said that the review was, quote, always going to be something of a whitewash, because of course it is. You know, a review into something is always whitewash when it doesn't come out with what you wanted. In a social media post, he said that it was completely irrelevant, that the appointment numbers were down, and he was repeated his concerns that people now linked to party donations had been given government jobs. The commission report said there was no, quote, no bar on individuals who had previously worked for political parties or even made political donations to becoming civil servants. Again, that's true. And if you wanted to bring that bar in, if you wanted to bring that in, then yeah, fine, bring that bar in. But I don't think the Conservatives are going to bring that in if they ever got back to power. It also added that departments were, of course, responsible for addressing any potential propriety matters. Newman, of course, argued that there still needs to be clarity about whether the civil service even knew of certain donations before appointing Sargent and Middleton and, of course, Caulfield. These questions, of course, back in September, where Chancellor Rachel Reeves said that a donation from Caulfield had been declared over a year ago, saying that we answered all these questions in the right way that the civil service asked when we made that appointment. Another Labour source said, this report now destroys the Tory party's very desperate smear campaign and exposes now a rank hypocrisy after they made more than 4 times as many civil service appointments a month without competition. So I think that's, this basically closes the book on this. Though I don't think you're going to be seeing too many people talk about it, but there you go. In summary, the Commission said that it was now largely satisfied with the processes now in place with departments to apply, to consider, and even approve exception requests. They said occasionally these appointments were, of course, not fully justified according to the terms of the Commission's recruitment principles or appeared to lack justification for the length. Some departments did appear to lack certain central tracking systems. The review, of course, made a number of recommendations, including advising all departments as to the process of the exception approval forms, explaining why it would not be appropriate to run a full, fair, and open recruitment process. It also said that there should be robust challenge processes in place to ensure that the exceptions were, of course, strictly applied. So that's it. Case closed. That's it, closed. If anyone ever brings this up again, you can tell them, or anyone talks about this, you can tell them, well, the review came back. This is what the review found. The watchdog, when they looked into this, they were entirely satisfied with the review processes. They did not find any cronyism. They could not find any evidence of it. And they said, yeah, we're largely satisfied. And if anything, what needs to be done is that departments need to be educated about what the exemption clause actually means and told if there is an exception, then the department needs to make it very clear why a recruitment process is not going to be done instead. And again, it's laid it out why the exemption clause exists. It means if you need to get someone highly skilled into a job or a short length of time to sort of do something, maybe like write a report or do a review, then maybe you need to sort of have these sort of extension clauses. Should there be a bar on people who made sort of political donations? Yeah, sure. I don't really see that being a problem of that coming in either. I think that would actually strengthen this type of thing. I wouldn't have a problem if that was brought in. Might it sort of lock off maybe certain people, but then I think you could argue that maybe things like, as we saw, Labour Together made sort of donations and sort of they've had sort of people sort of join and become part of the government. They could say, well, look, there's this person who we sort of would recommend. And bear in mind, you see this in America with, cabinet approval processes. Trump is basically given a list by Project 2025 and said, right, you should hire these people. go and hire them. Is that maybe what we should do? We'll see. But I'm fine with like these exemption rules being there. They are there for a reason. Again, to sort of hire and get people either in for like a short term because you need them sort of now. You can't wait. Maybe 6 months. That's normally how long like before you even actually get to recruiting someone. How that normally actually takes place, and then of course there's time involved in actually recruit people. Be able for the notice being out itself. you know, it can take a long time. So I am fine with sort of these exception rules being placed. I'm fine that this watchdog came back and said, we are largely satisfied. There was no cronyism going on. I only have to ask this question now. I understand why many of the right wing media are just going to ignore this because it's what they'll do. Meanwhile, of course, there's going to be many people on the left who, a couple of months ago, were just using this as a cudgel to beat Labour with, saying, look, see all this cronyism, nothing's changed, it's just, red Tories. How many are actually going to have the decency to come out and say, well, actually, the report Watchdog did come back and didn't find any allegations of cronyism. I was wrong on that. Just how many? I'm not holding my breath. I'm not holding my breath on that, but we'll see. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, as always, links down below in the comments. You can help support the channel by clicking the like and share button. There's the Patreon page down below. There's the Buy Me Coffee link where you can buy me coffee. The YouTube thank you button, the Patreon page, the Pony Club. All that stuff is down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.